last September, I went to Colorado on an elk hunt. And I went with guys who had been going for many years to this exact same spot. And as I was preparing for the trip, they told me there are several things you need to watch out for. One is altitude sickness. So we were going to be anywhere from 9,000 to 11,000 feet. So they're like little cans of 100% oxygen for you to use the first couple of days while you're there. Will probably keep you okay. Another one was hydration or dehydration. So you need to have a way to filter water from a stream because we can't take all the water that we're going to need. And then you need to find a way to get electrolytes in your system as well. One was chapped lips. Like one guy was like, you bring multiple things of chapstick. You don't want chapped lips. I'm like, I think you have a problem with chapped lips. I don't know if that's going to be my thing. And then the fourth one was your boots. Good, worn-in boots. Otherwise, you're going to get blisters. The boots got me. The boots that I hunted in, I have owned for 10 years. Did a lot of hunting in those boots. In fact, in preparation for the trip, I rucked, that's when you put weight in a backpack and you walk, for over 100 miles in those boots in the months leading up to the hunt. But I don't know if you guys know this, but where we live in Jefferson County is a little bit flatter than what Colorado is. Is that news to anybody? It wasn't news to me, but it's a lot different when you're just like walking, along the Dix Irvington Road, and when you are walking up a mountain going 1,000 feet in a few hundred yards. So what got me was going up, the boots just rubbed my heels wrong. And so if you would have had a 50-cent piece, you guys know what those are, right? Like kids don't know, but it's got JFK on it. You could not cover the blister that I had on each of the back of my heels. So we had one morning, the guys were like, it was frustrated. It was raining. It was cold. And they're like, let's have a morale day. We're going to go to Denny's for breakfast. And I was like, I will not object to going to Denny's for breakfast. I ordered 2 breakfasts, and I devoured both of them. And I drank so much coffee. But there was a Walmart close by. So we had driven, an hour and a half to get to this Denny's. And they're like, hey, let's go to Walmart. Anybody needs anything? And I found a pair of knockoff Crocs. They were like the Denver Broncos. They were bright orange. But I was like, I want to wear shoes that do not rub my heel. I was really tempted to hunt in those. I just didn't know how I'd make it up and down the mountain. Because whenever they said, watch out for these pitfalls, they were right. Now, hydration I was fine with. Altitude sickness I was fine. I was warm enough at night, like all the other, but man, I could not walk when I got home from that trip. Anything that we do that is worthwhile is going to have blessings and burdens attached to it. And we have to recognize the blessings while navigating the burdens well. You remember when you had little babies and they cried all night long? And you're like, you're lucky you're so cute because I'll give you away to somebody for 2 hours of sleep. It's like there are blessings of having a little baby. But there are burdens and difficulties when your kids are like itty bitty. And every stage of parenting is like that, by the way. There are blessings and burdens associated with each. What we're going to talk about today as we finish our series, Till Death Do Us Part, is we're going to talk about some marriage pitfalls. Some things that after you say I do, and after you start living life together, and after you start trying to figure out how it's all going to look, there are 4 pitfalls that oftentimes make their way into a marriage, and they become, like marriage will become, if you allow these to consume you, it'll become more of a burden than it is a blessing. The first one that we're going to talk about is money. Of all the marriages that end in divorce, 75% of them say that money was one of the leading causes. Now, from a biblical perspective, we could look at like 1 Timothy chapter 6 that says, keep yourself free from the love of money, be content with what you have, because God promised, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. But in America, we get so obsessed and consumed with stuff that we allow stuff to be like one of our gods that we worship, that we'll do anything for. And what happens is we elevate possessions and stuff over the different relationships that we have. Part of the issue with money is oftentimes you have a saver and a spender, and they marry each other. And then they can't agree on anything. Now, if you have two savers that get together, you're not going to have any fun. But if you have two spenders that get together, you're not going to have any money left over at the end of the month to pay your bills. So it's good to have one of each present, and then for you guys to talk through and figure things out. And the other issue is, there are things that you want to spend your money on that they do not. So she wants new curtains. And you're like, well, can't we just use like the sheets we're not using on our bed? And because, like just hang those up, that's fine. And you want a new golf club or a new bow or whatever. She's like, you have a bow. Yeah, but it doesn't shoot as fast as this new Matthews bow. Well, I mean, the one you got is probably good enough. And so you debate. We don't need a new rug. We've got a rug, but this doesn't match our couch. We didn't need the new couch either. It's like you go back and forth. You can't agree on anything. So here's the solution that many couples come to. And you're going to be like, uh-oh, that's us. Maybe, I don't know. So I'm not trying to offend. I'm just trying to point you back to Scripture. The solution that most couples come to, that I've interacted with on this, it's like, well, he's got his money, she's got her money, and we don't cross over. So it's like I make my money, and I pay for these bills, and we agree. But then if I want to go buy a big truck, if I want to go buy, that's my money, I can do whatever I want. And same with her. Like, she pays for these bills, and then she can do whatever she wants with her money. Do you do that in any other area? Would you say, well, this is my kid, and that's her kid? Well, aren't they both your kids? Yeah, but we couldn't decide how we were going to raise our kids. So I get to raise my kid the way I want. She gets to raise her kids the way she wants. And her kid's a pansy. My kid's tough. And she's like, well, your kid's going to need counseling. And my kid's loved and nurtured. It's like, no, you need both mom and dad present to help a kid to be well-rounded. Well, that's where he lives. That's where I live. Well, you guys don't live together? No, we can't agree on how to spend our time. And so we just live apart from each other. Well, that doesn't sound like a very healthy marriage to me. So why do we do it with money? Genesis 2:24, a man leaves his father and his mother, he's united to his wife, and they become one flesh. There's one flesh. Spiritually, theologically, you are one in the eyes of God. Do not unone some area of your life when you're supposed to be one. Your solution, and I don't mean to offend, but your solution to we are both extremely selfish and cannot talk through problems, our solution is we're just going to separate out this part of our life. That is not a solution that leads to a healthy marriage. What's going to happen over time, and you don't realize it, but emotionally, because money has become a wedge for you, you are going to continue to drift apart. And the other thing it does is it puts pressure on both of you. We both have to work full time now. We both have to compete with how much money we're making now. When we got married, my wife and I, when we moved to St. Louis, it's like, okay, Shanna was pregnant with Titus. She's like, I want to stay home with Titus. And I said, okay, let's do it. We had to figure it out. I couldn't say, well, I mean, if you don't make any money, you don't get to spend any money. I mean, how are you going to pay for your bills? It's like, no, these are our bills. This is our money. And if I make 100% and you make 0, we make this amount of money. And I've shared with you before, when we were living in St. Louis, right out of the gate, it's not like I made a ton of money. We had to make so many cuts. My parents gave us money for Christmas, and we would put that in an envelope. If we ever went out to eat, because we had no money to go out to eat, it's like, hey, let's go to Qdoba. And we'd go to that envelope with the Christmas money in it, and we'd go get Qdoba. Like that, it was so exciting. It was a precious time. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen if with this, you've got your money and I've got, I'm not paying your bills. I'm not paying for your car. So you have one income, both agreeing on where you're going to spend your money. Now, you have things that you really want to buy. Because even the most aggressive saver has some things that will catch their eyes, like, ooh, I really do want that. You sit down with your spouse and you talk with that. You don't open up another credit card that she doesn't have access to and like, well, now I can spend money and she doesn't know or whatever. It's like you have to sit down and agree. And if you cannot agree, then you need to spend some time and some energy praying through some things. Because if you struggle in this area, it will affect you in all the other areas. And it will consume your mind. So you have one income and you agree. You come up with a budget and you say, here's our budget. Go to DaveRamsey.com. Come up. He's got a budget. He's got cash flow worksheets. He's got all this stuff that I really nerd out about. I love doing that kind of stuff. My wife is about as apathetic as can be with all of it. And we have an app on our phones. They're synced up. It's called the Every Dollar app. Every dollar that we spend gets thrown into the app, and then we put it in one of the categories. That's fun for me. I don't know. I should have probably been an accountant, maybe, because I'm like, ooh, look at that, And she's like, I don't know. But, teamwork makes the dream work. And so there are different practical tools, but really, you have to sit down, say, I'm not going to push my agenda, my selfishness on in this area. I'm going to look for your wants, desires, and wishes. That will motivate them, hopefully, to do the same. And then you can begin to navigate one of these major marriage pitfalls. Okay? So, with regard to money, it's our money, not mine or yours. And you do your best to decide together how to spend it. Okay? Here's another marriage pitfall. Your kids. The reason that your kids become a pitfall is a number of reasons. One is the kids become the center of the family universe. It's all about the kids. So all your time, all your energy, all your money goes to the kids. And your kids are not going to be, you're going to blink and they're going to be out of the house. Then you get to look at each other and say, I don't even know if we like each other. You've invested so much in the kids, that then when they're gone, it's like, let's bring them back, because I don't know if this is going to work, man. I don't know if I'm enjoying this as much. Your kids are a crucial part of your family. They are to be loved, they are to be guided and directed, but they are not more important than your spouse. This is one of the things that makes blended families so difficult. When you say I do, when the two become one flesh, your spouse is the most important person to you. It's the most important relationship to you. That becomes difficult when you bring kids into the relationship. It's not impossible, but it's like that's where there's a difficult dynamic. So part of it is there's tension because the kids get elevated. Part of the issue is our kids start to rule the roost. They start to rule the family. And this comes to a lack of discipline. We don't discipline our kids. Now there's a tension. There's a movement now. It's called gentle parenting. I am not a fan of gentle parenting. Gentle parenting for me as a kid was my mom's driving, so she can't completely get me with all of the backhand that she wants to. It's a little more gentle than... Now, in script, look at this, Proverbs 29:15. A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. No amens. Okay, we'll keep going. Discipline your children, and they will give you peace. They will bring you the delights you desire. Now, there we go. I heard a whisper. We're getting into it a little bit. Now, here's the thing, is that, I try to have very clear rules. I never discipline my kids in anger. I don't lose control and yell at my kids. I don't cuss at my kids. I don't hit them when I'm angry. I never hit them in the face. But when they were little, I'd high-five their little behind a little bit to remind them we're not going to act that way. The funny thing is, I've got a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. I couldn't tell you the last time I spanked them. When they were little, I spanked them early and often, man. Spank them early and often. And then it's just my presence, hey, whoop. They shut it down. Now, when I'm not around, who knows what they're doing, okay? I get that. But at least it's we are going to set the tone. So, so one parent often, in the counseling app, one parent wants to gentle parent, one parent is hey, they can't do this. So you got a kid throwing a fit in the store, and he's rolling around on the floor, and mom lays down next to him. Tell me your feelings. Tell me your truth. Tell me what's going on. I'm here for you. Let it out. It's okay to have these emotions. Oh my goodness, yes, that toy is so precious. You want it so bad. It's like little Bobby needs, like the concept of if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. It's taken from verses like this. It's like, okay, it's okay to pick up your kid and say, we're not going to do, I know you want the toy, but the more you do this, the less likely. And if you keep doing this, every toy that you've ever owned, I will burn it in front of you. Or whatever comes to your mind, okay? And if you say it out loud, and this is where you can't do it in anger, because if you say something out loud, you have to follow through with it. So if you do that again, I will take your Nintendo Switch and throw it in the pond. If you say that and then they do it again, guess what you have to do? So don't say it if you're not willing to do it. I've never threatened that, by the way, because I like playing the Nintendo Switch with them. So I wouldn't do that to get rid of something else. So discipline's a big issue. Another issue is, are we discipling our kids? Go into all the nations, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Jesus commands this. We're supposed to make disciples, bring people into a relationship with Jesus, help them grow. And oftentimes, we're not even discipling our kids. Proverbs 22:6, you probably have heard this before. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. This is not a promise, it is a proverb, but it's saying if you raise your kids up a certain way, though they may have a stint of rebellion in there when they're teenagers, adolescents, they will come back to what they know. Well, what are you raising your kids up in? What is it that they know? And here's a conviction that I have. I do not want to raise my kids the way that the people of the world raise their kids. The way that I raise my kids should be different. So if we have the exact same schedules with people who do not love Jesus, who don't prioritize a relationship with Him, and don't go to church, if our schedules look exactly the same, except I bring them to church on Sunday mornings and I drag them to church on Sunday nights, if that's the only difference, I'm not training them up in the way they should go. And we get caught up in a lie as parents that we are doing our child or our children a disservice if we don't have them plugged into all of these things. I want them to get good grades. They got to get good grades, so I'm going to push them into good grades. Or they got to be good at sports. We got to take them to this trainer, and we got to do these lessons, and we got to play on this travel team, or I got to teach them how to work hard, and so we're going to get them a job. We're going to give them these chores. All those things are good. None of getting bad grades or good grades. Like, get good grades, be good at sports, learn how to work hard. Those are good things. But if they get elevated to the point of now as a family, if your kid, somebody went to them and said, what's the most important thing to your mom or dad? And they said, that I get good grades. If they said that I'm good at sports, what would they say if someone asked them that? And it was a part of like a big survey, and the kid just said what came to their mind. Chipper Jones, you guys know who Chipper Jones is? Hall of Fame third baseman for the Braves. Chipper Jones is not I don't think he's at least in this talk, he did not present what he was saying from a biblical perspective. But he said, my kids are going to play multiple sports. If they play baseball, they're going to play in the summer. They're not doing baseball year round. He's like, I know what it takes to be good at baseball. I'm like, yeah, Chipper Jones does. So all these dads coaching these summer teams, they know, don't they? We got to do this. We got to go to this trainer. We got to do this. He's like, oh, so you know more about baseball than I do. I didn't realize that you were also a Hall of Fame third baseman for a team. You weren't. Oh, okay. You didn't. Oh, okay. You were not. You were not good, and I'm really good, and I'm saying this, and you're saying that. So who do you think's right? That's basically. He's like, we're going to take family vacations. We're going to spend time together. And I thought, okay, this is a guy who knows what it is to play at the highest possible level. Saying to a bunch of parents, you guys are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, man. I don't know what it is you're drinking, but stop giving it to your kids. So, my kids, more than anything, I want them to love Jesus and to know what it means to grow in a relationship with Him. The way that I disciple them is, just like Deuteronomy 6 says, Impart these things on your children as you're walking along the road, as you sit down, as you're going to bed. I will find a way to teach godly principles in every situation, in every movie, in every TV show, in every instance. Because godly principles apply to everything. So they come home, they're like, oh yeah, this happened. You know what, that reminds me of a story. They're like, They're like, here come, like, should we get our Bibles out? Are you going to take up an offering? Like, what's going on here? But it's like, that's what I do. So the most important thing is that they love Jesus. Is that the most important thing to you for your kids? If it is, then you need to prioritize that in the way that you spend your time and energy as a family. If you prioritize your time just like every other family that don't have Jesus as the most important thing, there's a really good chance he's not the most important thing to you. And you would never say, I hope you would never say, oh, I guess it'd be okay if my kid got to heaven when they died, but I really want them to play such and such in college. You would never say that, hopefully. Hopefully you'd say, I want them to be in heaven forever. And if they play in college, that's great, but like the Jesus stuff's most important. Then you have to prioritize that. Number two, when my kids are adults, I want them to want to spend time with me. That means that if I push them into sports and I get them up at 6 a.m. to do drills and I make them do all this stuff and they resent me and deep down like they hate that I'm doing, like, well, what have I gained? What have I gained? My kid's a great athlete but doesn't want to spend time with me. In my vision of what it means, I have gained nothing. I would rather my kid do what he loves, learn how to lose, because I love sports because it's like a microcosm of life. You learn how to win, you learn how to lose, you trust your teammates, you get yelled at. Like, there's a lot of good stuff that you just kind of have to deal with. But it is not the most important thing. So don't treat it like the most important thing. Money, kids, here's the third one. And this is where Shannon was like, this is a little awkward. And it is. But I'm just going to read the Bible and make some comments, okay? In 1 Corinthians 7, the Apostle Paul tells the readers, I wish all of you were like me. I don't have desires for intimacy. God wired me a different way. But if you have desires for intimacy, you need to get married because you don't want to burn with lust and burn with passion. Get married so that you have an outlet, which is not like Hallmark Channel romance type stuff, but that's what he says. It's not a sin to get married. It's not a sin not to get married. But if you don't need to get married, then don't get married, because then you can really focus on the gospel and preaching to the nations. But if you're going to burn with passion, you should probably take a wife. And here's what he says about it. Now, for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. So there's sexual morality because people are trying to be really spiritual. Well, I'm not going to get married because then, that's kind of a yucky thing, and I don't want to do that. I'm just going to really focus on the Lord. Well, if you're wired for intimacy and you shut that part of your life down, it's like there are sins that are going to creep up. I think whenever you force your clergy not to get married, there are a whole slew of sins that come along with that. It may be good to not marry, but if you have desires in you, you need to get married. And this is what Paul's saying. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Still no amens? Okay, that's okay. It is getting like hot in here, isn't it, or no? Just me? Okay. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time. Why? So that you may devote yourselves to prayer. So you can go pray and be with the Lord. And remember, spiritual always trumps the physical in every area of life. So your relationship with God is the most important thing to you, should be the most important thing to you. And where Paul says, like, intimacy is a regular part of marriage. And if you choose to like abstain for a while, it's so you can go be with the Lord and really focus on your relationship with Him, but then come back together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. It is getting really warm in here. My parents are here. My grandma's here. Like, this is Here's the thing, is that God gave intimacy as a gift. And within the gift, we are hardwired a certain way to desire it. Doing marriage counseling, it's like, I've got a husband and wife, and it's like, sometimes, like I remember one instance, she's like, I think he's not as deep spiritually because he desires this so much. And I took him to this passage. And the husband's like, that's in the Bible? I said, yeah, you need to start reading the Bible, bro. There's a lot of good stuff in there. He really perked up. He didn't say amen, but I could tell he was feeling it. And I said, so the thing is, like, once you get married, you now have an obligation to your spouse. And you don't lack spiritual maturity if you desire what God has given you as a gift. And the thing about it is, intimacy is the one thing that you do for your spouse that only you can do for your spouse. It's the only thing. So intimacy has to be a part of marriage. Now, let me just talk to the fellows real quick. You think about intimacy differently than your wife does. You're like, yeah, I knew that. I didn't need to come to hear a sermon for that. For her, tenderness, kindness, love has to be a part of your relationship. The best thing you can do is whatever she's stressed about, whatever's going on, that you help out in that area. Whatever it looks like, whatever it is. That is going to put her heart and mind in a place where, and she's not wired like you, but like, that's probably the thing you love most about her is that she's not a man. Like that was top on your list. Like she's not a dude. What do you love most about your wife? She's not a dude. Like she's a woman, and I love that. Okay, well, she's going to think about things differently. Ladies, your husband, and I can't remember the numbers, but in my research for this sermon, it's like men think about intimacy more than they think about anything else. Women, it's like it's not up there for you. You think about food more than you think about intimacy, okay? And the thing you think about the most isn't close to what men think about the most. So, you may think, well, he's not spiritual enough, or if he just loved Jesus enough. No, if he has a healthy desire for you, that is a gift from God. And he's going to try to do the things that you need him to do, even when he's not in the mood, to help out around the house or whatever. And there's one thing that you can do for your spouse that only you can do, and you need to make sure that that thing gets done. Otherwise, Satan will tempt you because of your lack of self-control. You will inadvertently push your spouse away and to a book or to a website or into the arms of someone else. And we don't want that for each other. Everybody okay? Let's move on. Faith is the final one, okay? Whenever you are in the dating process, you're thinking about engaged, all that stuff, the most important attribute that your spouse has is that they love Jesus. It's the most important thing. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. What do the righteous and wickedness have in common? What fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? If Jesus is the most important thing to you and Jesus is not the most important thing to them, you're going to be pulling in opposite directions. Things are going to be completely out of whack. And so like how you spend your time, how you spend your money, it's going to be so different. And he's going to say, I don't want you giving hard-earned money to the church. Why are you always volunteering at the church? It's like there's going to be just a constant tension. And then if you say, well, this is how I want our kids to go to church, or I want Jesus to be the most important thing to him, there's going to be constant tension. The one time I've refused to do a wedding was because of this. Because the wife was a member of our church in St. Louis. She loved the Lord, a faithful servant of Christ. The husband was a radical atheist. He's like, I love her, I hate Jesus. I hate the church. Like, I think it's stupid. Like, those two things just cannot fit together. So, in good conscience, I'm not going to perform this ceremony because of this. And like you guys are just, it's like basically you're lighting a stick of dynamite and just waiting for it to go off. Now, they ended up just going to like a justice of the peace deal. They got married there. She continued to come to our church for about a year, and then she just kind of fell away because he wanted to go, on the lake, or he wanted to do these different things, and church wasn't a priority. This is what happens. So if you're dating, make sure that Jesus is the most important thing to them. And you're like, okay, well, that's great, but what if I'm already married? What if one of us became a Christian after we got married? Like, what does that all look like? Paul has some words of encouragement there as well. So this is going back to 1 Corinthians 7, which was the awkward part we just read. Paul says, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. Well, they don't love Jesus. Well, two have become one flesh. You don't get to unone what God has made one because perspectives or lifestyle choices have changed. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they're holy. But this is how he ends. But if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or sister is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace. How do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? There's a guy named Lee Strobel who has written a number of apologetic books. The Case for Christ, The Case for a Creator, The Case for Faith. And he started investigating Christianity because his wife became a Jesus follower, and he noticed her change of temperament, the way that she served. He's like, there is so much different about you that I like, that I'm going to investigate the Jesus stuff for myself. And he became a Christian and began to write books on the Christian faith. So you have no idea what God might use you to do within the context of your marriage. And so, because I think some people, it's like, well, okay, I'm not supposed to be unequally yoked. I'm a Christian, he's not, or I'm a Christian, she's not, so I guess we need to unyoke. Doesn't work that way. So faith should be the most important thing to all of us. And we should work together to glorify God and to benefit our family through our relationship with Him. Let me wrap up with this. Wherever you're at, whatever's going on, God can restore every relationship, every issue. God can fix broken marriages. But it will take a radical shift in terms of your mindset and your behaviors in order for the life change that's needed to happen for it to happen. But through His Holy Spirit, He gives you the strength that you need to prioritize and execute all that He has called you to. What it takes is a willingness to be humble and obedient to what Christ has called us to within the context of marriage.